I'm very grateful to the sponsors of this conference for having invited me to speak on this occasion. On the occasion of 50 years of independence of Bangladesh, I want to start speaking on the aspirations at the time of independence. The objective of independent Bangladesh was to have a democratic, socialist country. Immediately on independence, Bangladesh's highest priority was rehabilitation and reconstruction. Very true. And it covered all areas of the economy. Infrastructure was devastated. Chittagong port was clogged, not functioning. In fact, the 5-year plan was preceded by, which is not recognized very widely, an annual plan of reconstruction and rehabilitation. It's sort of a pink book, it's a famous book. It's called Annual Plan 73-74 of Reconstruction and Development. This was what all the details, how to put the economy back on footing before you start growing, was done. And that was his first priority, and you submitted to him, and we implemented it, and then continues the next stage. And the second, after having that, we have to keep in mind, even prior to independence, population problem was a problem, and our food shortage was a problem. So therefore, we had to emphasize greatly the importance of the increasing food production and more equitable distribution of food in terms of looking after the vulnerable poor groups of society. For that, we have to have food distribution system, which was prior to independence also a rationing system. It was now revamped. Agriculture was given high priority, and for that, all the necessary policies in terms of provision of inputs. HEB was introduced even before independence. Now the question is, HEB needed as supplementary inputs irrigation and fertilizer. There's a controversy which is more important, irrigation or fertilizer. A group said no, it is fertilizer, another group said no, irrigation. And there was eventually settled in favor of both. But then that was one issue. The second issue was subsidy. Should fertilizer be subsidized? Because the argument was the subsidy, because of the way it's distributed, doesn't go to the small farmers, it goes to the big farmers. So they don't benefit from it. What's the purpose of all this? Why can't you change it and allow the market price of fertilizer, but compensate the farmers with subsidies independently? That was found to be too complicated and not politically acceptable. So we went back to subsidy. This compromise demonstrates that what is considered ideal or economically best justified is not always politically feasible. So compromise has to be made. Then Bangabandhu had thought that the landless laborers has to be given land. And how do you do that? You don't give them on individual basis, you keep them in cooperative, and the land should be taken above a limit from the big farmers and give it to cooperatives and let them organize this end. And we provide them other inputs to successfully increase output. Nationalization was an issue which was in effect a politically very hot issue, but it was in fact not a very serious issue. As we analyze after the whole debate, what was this debate all about? After all, very large sector of the economy was already in the public sector. Firstly, EPDIC, and secondly, the abundant properties by Pakistanis, they had to be in the private sector, government sector. So what is very small, and that is the amount of debate, shall we take them or not. But we said, believing as we do in socialism, how could we discriminate against Bangladesh, against only the non-Bangladeshi? We should take them on. So we took them on. That was a huge amount of controversy, and a subcommittee was appointed by Nurul as the chairman, and we all debated and eventually decided, all right. But then you do that, you allow small enterprises above, below a certain level to function. And that limit was successfully, at the end of 1 year, remit and successfully raised all over. And it was totally eliminated. We had a very successful population control policy. It was in fact remarkably successful. With the help of NGOs and the government agencies, we had a very successful one. And then the high priority was given to agriculture sector in terms of providing modern inputs and marketing and road infrastructure to facilitate increased production, marketing. By the way, the most important sector at growth in those areas was Nurul non-farm sector. And there, East Pakistan and Bangladesh, in fact, a remarkable achievement in this. And this was due to organizations like Grameen Bank and BRAC, including their achievement in the social sector. BRAC added, of course, health and education. Months they will be in the school learning this basic education. This was BRAC's innovation, non-formal education, that's what they said. It was, I think, it's a great achievement. The government infrastructure, was entirely government's responsibility. Road infrastructure, Bangladesh is the highest density of road per capita in the world. Rural road per capita. A tremendous achievement by the government. And it facilitated integration of the economy and trade and commerce. Farmers did respond to market signals, price incentives, and marketing possibilities. This is very true indeed. And this was, you can shift from agriculture, non-agriculture, to government industries entirely response to incentives. Two things have contributed over time, even today, to Bangladesh's to growth. One was remittance, another was exports. And exports, of course, concentrated on one commodity, and there the majority of the low-skill levelers were women. And this is an unusual phenomenon for a developing country, where the women take over, run the industries. They are except in the skill managers, all of them are women. From village, rural, uneducated women stopped this garment industry. A remittance was the source of income from the rural population of Bangladesh. And that remittance was used for both consumption and investment. There were a lot of studies on this. It was remarkable impact of remittance on rural development of Bangladesh in terms of, first, immediate increase in consumption. Second, house construction, for example, was tremendously encouraged by remittance. Rural non-farm activities, what are they really? Basically, trade, commerce, and small industries. All of these needed market access and rural infrastructure. Because interaction between farm and non-farm was the basics, it's a synergy, you might say, new term, was the promoter of growth in Bangladesh economy. The non-farm sector provided inputs to farm sector and demand for output of non-farm sector. Similarly, non-farm sector provided inputs and market for farm sector. This was, maybe all countries are true, but this is Bangladesh, it was very starkly true. The social indicators in terms of achievement in education and health. Now, we have always said you have made tremendous progress. It is true. We have made progress, but then the benefits of health measures and education had not been equally distributed to poor and the rich, and also between men and women. And special efforts were made by Bangladesh government later on to give scholarships to women to get access to higher education. Not college, high school, to promote women's education. Productivity has been discussed, measured in all different directions. No, it is not. Productivity is a function of what? The output-input ratio. There, we have fallen short, and Bangladesh is not unique in this respect. It is fallen short. Why? Partly because we have not trained our labor enough to take better use of inputs. Poverty reduced in Bangladesh, all the statistics prove it, but inequality increased. And I am not very worried about it, because poverty reduction is our major issue. If poverty reduction, and if those who below the poverty line, their number decreases, and those above the poverty line, they go up, automatically inequality will increase. But the question is, yes, high inequality income is, what does it do? Two things. One, it could lead to export of capital abroad. And now question, how do you handle this? Are there not sufficient incentives to invest at home? Then why are they transferring abroad? That is a matter of consideration indeed. Why would they transfer capital abroad if they can? The issue is, if they invest at home, the returns income will be taxed, heavily taxed, higher the income. But abroad, there is no question of tax. It's a tax evasion, one standard policy all over the world in avoiding transferring investment abroad. And political problem. Now, I am not sure. Yes, there could be a political instability. That why are they not taxed? Why am I paying for? Why are they getting rich? Because they could not reach without government facilities being given to them. So why aren't they taxed? And inequality is basically a political problem, in my view. It leads to political instability all over the world, everywhere, all the time. In economic policy making, it must be very important to have access to independent, accurate, unbiased data. Second, their analysis, also non-political analysis. Otherwise, economic policy making is impossible. And even though the politicians of today may think they are right, they will be blamed tomorrow for their failures. So it is better for the politicians to remember that they cannot get away by saying that we didn't know. Economic analysis is very important because popular parlance, they have all kinds of explanations for, let's say, for example, famine in Bangladesh. Now, this is the usual explanation is the mismanagement by the government of the food distribution, food supplies. But that's not true. When subsequent analysis proved it is completely untrue because of the way the various crops, the cropping pattern and the crop which is affected by flood, which is not affected by flood. This analysis is very critical for clearing up the issue that it is not because of mismanagement, but because of basic facts underlying. There have been independent research by various organizations, including myself, on all the, for example, on agricultural marketing, there was always a problem whether it should be done by the government or in private sector. And we did some surveys, village surveys, and asked the farmers. It seems to be they prefer the other one, the non-government ones. Corruption and delay, all kinds of things, non-payment of dues. Unfortunately, donors have a very important role. And that has been a matter of controversy again, whether we are acted by the dictates of donors or our own initiative. I suspect it's both. The economists supported this, but majority of politicians were not excited about it. But the donors and economists had the same attitude towards liberalization, market liberalization. Because politicians usually have a tendency to control, to decide as if they are in charge. Whereas market is liberalizing economic functions from the control of the politicians. And there is a psychological problem, and in which donors and economists combine together to release the grasp, the dominance of political thinking, political pressure on this area. The extent and the nature of inequality should be discussed, researched into by the researchers in Bangladesh. Where does it have and the relationship between reduction of poverty and inequality, which is more important. This subject should be researched because there's also a misunderstanding about it, that reduction of poverty is consistent with increased inequality, and which is more inimical to growth. And yes, growth, that's correct. So this is a research topic, and I would suggest that researchers do analyze this more carefully. Often questions are raised, yes, output is increasing, but the input-output relationship in terms of the ratio of input-output is too high, so the productivity is low. Now, this has to be researched, and it's not an easy subject to research because facts not only easy to get and easy to analyze. It's another subject which I would recommend seriously done analysis of. And inequality, productivity, and governance, yes, it is very important. In fact, I want to remind my audience that there was a conference I held in Dhaka on governance and development. Book has been published, and various aspects of governance. I would request my colleagues to go back and discuss very seriously the relationship between governance and development. What is it? And also nature of corruption. Exactly what is corruption? I've written about all this. I have 2 books on the subject. What exactly is corruption? Corruption is nepotism, favoritism, embezzlement of funds, and capture of state power. It's not understood in details by a lot of people, a lot of economists. Now, which one is more dangerous for growth and which one is not? And which one creates inequality rather than production? So this kind of research is, I think, I strongly recommend people to do that, be ideas to do it. The question of multidisciplinary research has been subject of a lot of controversy and discussion in research centers all over the world, including in Bangladesh maybe. I remember when in PIDE we had a section on demography. Now, it was introduced because it's considered very important. Population problem, growth, nature, and impact on development, very important. So a section added later on demography. And when I transferred PIDE to BID Dhaka, remember PIDE was Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. I transferred it to Bangladesh Institute of Development Studies, not economics. That shows the interdisciplinary research that I emphasized. Governance, I remember the head of the section, I forget now. Governance and imports on economics relationship, all of these. And in fact, to do this, I held a conference in Dhaka with some foreign money of all experts on governance development. A book was published. So this is a subject on research is due. I consider economic policy making is critically dependent. The capacity of the ministries of the Planning Commission, Ministry of Finance, to do economic analysis is critical. It cannot be outsourced. In Bangladesh, there I don't want to remember name, I know this kind of research is outsourced. This is very critical. This is destructive in my view of the building of capacity of the government. They should train their own people, send them abroad, and give them enough rewards to stay there. I am told when they come back, they go to other ministries. They don't stay in this because it's not. The promotion is restricted because they can go around all the other ministries promoted. Here, stuck in one ministry, how can they go up? All of them cannot become secretaries. So there is something wrong in the management of these ministries in order to allow incentives for economists to stay and do research for the job. Question is often raised, how does an economist or a researcher communicate to a politician and convey to the politician the essence of his research finding so that politicians can understand and react? Now, this depends on the capacity of the researcher to explain in the language in which the politician understands. This is really remarkable. This is very important. Often, if you use technical language and mathematical analysis to explain to a politician, it will be pure waste of time. You have to know his language, and that is a great quality for economists must learn over and over again, how to communicate with him. You must communicate with the politician in the language he understands. The language of the politician must be understood by the researcher. Otherwise, the communication is not possible. What is the language? Because that needs tremendous tact on behalf of the researcher. He must understand the experience and the world of experience and in the environment in which a politician functions. That is my experience with Bangabandhu. If you have to explain fertilizer subsidy to a politician, how do you explain to him? Why do you need... He says he has been told by his farmers, his parliamentarians, that very important fertilizer subsidy for the farmers. Without that, they cannot produce. Now, that is his experience. That is his communication to him by the electorate. Now, how do you explain to him that it has to be countered? Now, that language you have to understand. You have to speak in his language. Yes, it is maybe so. Shall we find out why it is so? Maybe a survey is necessary. We find out who uses the fertilizer and how, where. And then you produce the facts to the politician, he may accept it. For policy making, is important, very important, to have independent agencies collecting data. Second, independent non-government agencies to research, analyze the data and get the results for guidance for the government. I'm mentioning independence because if you have government agencies and politicians interfering in data and analysis, they will never get the right answer and they will be blamed tomorrow for their failure today. They may not remember, their posterity to remember, they will be blamed for their failure. So I would request them to remember that this is important to let the data gathering be independent and done, and also research be done by independent agencies. And whether they can accept the results and accept the policy, if they are unable, they should explain to the people why are they unable to do this, so that their inabilities are understood by posterity and the present generation. In Pakistan days, when I was running what is it called? The PID, what was the father of BIDs, and there I had this total independence. Whatever the reasons was, I was allowed independence by the government, and government for some reason allowed PID total independence in research. For example, I brought in an outside economist because of political implications from Norway to analyze on the basis of household survey disparity in per capita income in East and West. You see, I must tell you that my contact with Bangabandhu was in those 2 years, 3 years I was with him, I was very close to him. Everybody knows it, I don't have to add to this. And I discussed with him corruption, misgovernance, all the rest of it, and he was very frank with me. But he was also confronted with this serious problem, and he allowed me, because I was working with him very closely, allowed me to give him all the facts in their bare, I should say, ruthless detail to him, and then explain the consequences. And politics was his business, but my job was to explain to him what are the consequences, and sometimes he will accept them, sometimes he will accept them. And also, Bangabandhu, in my dealings with him, he told me so, that look here, from my childhood days, I have been taught that the teachers almost can do no wrong. I'm exaggerating it, but trust them. They have no axe to grind. The researchers and academics, basically, on the whole, if they are axe to grind, it's too obvious. You can find them easily. They cannot conceal their techniques. They are not so expert in this. So I had always thought it is easy, and they were very frank with me. And example is, I said myself, he was very frank with me, and he would, as I just said, he would accept and reject and give his idea of corruption and misgovernance, etc. And Bangabandhu also allowed facts to be out, so that he would take decision or not, it is his business, it is political business, but we must be allowed total independent academic and total independent research. And I think those who today are followers of Bangabandhu and often mention his heritage, that they are carrying his task, should remember what Bangabandhu treated, the data gathering, independent research, and all the rest of it. And possibly this is my last chance to speak to all of you. And I thank you very much, and God look after you.